I think we are almost at quorum. And so I'm going to dive right in. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Really grateful to see hundreds of you joining us for a special conversation today on a question that has dominated news headlines, podcast episodes, government press briefings over the past week. And that question is whether the United States and Israel destroyed or delayed Iran's nuclear program. I'm going to be honest with you. I am entering into this discussion with a heavy dose of humility because for those of you who joined us last Friday, you'll recall that we had two brilliant former U.S. military and government officials who opined on the question of whether the U.S. would enter into the fight. The presumption was it's not going to happen. But little did we know at that time, a fleet of aircraft from the Weissman Air Force Base in Knob Noster, Missouri, began a historic 37-hour mission that ended up over the mountainous Iranian cities of Qom and Isfahan province. Now, I'm Sabbath observant, and this was one of those you remember where you were moments, right? I didn't know about the attack until a friend popped by with a certain degree of like cautious jubilation to share the news about what just happened. Over time, we would learn that the United States used over 125 aircraft and 75 precision-guided weapons to attack three nuclear sites in Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan. We learned that the U.S. Navy fired over 24 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles from an Ohio-class guided nuclear submarine at targets in Isfahan. And we'd learn that for the very first time, fighter aircraft and B-2 Spirit stealth bombers dropped 14 payloads of 30,000-pound GPU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, known as the MOPS, or perhaps you've heard them colloquially referred to as the bunker buster bombs. And they dropped these bombs on target sites, including the highly protected Fordow uranium enrichment facility, which reportedly sits under 300 feet of granite, tucked deep inside a mountain. It is undeniably the case that key parts of the Iranian nuclear weapons program were hit hard in an unprecedented joint attack by the United States and the State of Israel. But the question is, how bad were they hit? On Saturday, that night, President Trump said the sites were, quote, obliterated. On Tuesday, a leaked preliminary report from the Defense Intelligence Agency cast doubt on whether core elements were actually destroyed. On Wednesday, the CIA director said the nuclear program was, quote, severely damaged. And on Thursday, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency said the centrifuges at Fordow are, quote, no longer operational, and that the overall program suffered, quote, enormous damage. So what exactly happened? When will we know, if ever, what precisely was achieved? What is the impact of these attacks on the Middle East? Is this the dawn of a new era in the region? And what does this mean for the war with Hamas? I got to say, there is really no better person to help us unpack these questions than Dr. Eyal Hulata, a former national security advisor to Prime Ministers Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid. Previously, he had a distinguished 23-year career in the Mossad. He was reportedly the architect of Israel's Iran policy. And if that's not enough, he had a PhD in physics from Tel Aviv University, or he still has it. Today, he's a senior advisor at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, FDD, and we are so glad that he's here. Welcome, Eyal.
Thank you so much, Chanan, and happy to be here.
Just before we dive in, as a reminder, I'm going to be in discussion with Eyal for about 35 minutes. And throughout that time, if you have any questions, please insert them in the Q&A chat function on the bottom of your screen, and I will be sure to get to them in the final 15 to 20 minutes of the program. All right, a lot to discuss, too little time, so let's dive in. Yeah, let's kind of start with what I was just describing. All right, I get that the DIA report was a, quote, low confidence assessment. that it was likely leaked, I presume, for political purposes, that it was written only a day after the attack itself. So I guess two questions related to that. One, if it is in fact too early to assess the actual damage, how do we actually know if it was obliterated, like the program itself? But regardless, help us just make sense of all these different competing claims somewhat 6 days after the attack itself.
Hanan, that's a really good I think question and also framing that you put, because it is very interesting, right? I mean, we've done all of what we've done. Israel has done all of what it's done, and the US has joined, and we all just need to know, right? I mean, have we succeeded? Did we get the job done? Or more than that? And that's a difficult question to answer at this time. I will give you my analysis on it, but I have to say, as a first basis of principle, I'm not sure even the Iranians know exactly what's the amount of damage that was incurred to their facilities, because so many of them are now in rubble, and hard to know what's in there. And I think we need to dissect it into three things. The first is, we know what we wanted to target. What were the facilities, the personnel, the equipment, and so forth that we wanted to attack. And we can have, I think, pretty good battle damage assessment, BDA as it's called, on the ability to understand whether or not the bombs hit the right targets, whether or not they were detonated properly. And there is a good, I think, analysis to understand that the facilities that were hit, provided that the bombs reached the places we wanted them to reach, were destroyed completely. Obliterated is a very strong word. My English is limited, but definitely heavily destroyed. And I think this is the case for all of the key targets on the chain of the Iranian nuclear program, all of its components, in enrichment, in reprocessing. I won't get into all the details of that. The weaponization program, we'll talk about this a little bit later because I think it's important. So I think we have a good understanding for the attacks that Israel did, and also on the attack the Americans have done, about the direct damage to the facilities that we've struck. And on this, I think the president is right. The attack was successful. The bombs reached the right places. There is a magnificent report by David Albright from the Good ISIS organization, and Andreas Stricker from FDD that is working with him very, very tightly. And they put out a quite elaborate document with satellite facilities of all over different places, and you can read it if you're interested. And it's very clear. We have enough data just from imagery, even before we put other parts of SIGINT, to understand that all of the key facilities that were supposed to be attacked or planned to be attacked were attacked severely. That's a huge success, huge success. But that's not enough, because there are things that we knew in advance that we will not be attacking. We knew in advance that there's a good chance that the stockpile of the enriched uranium, and Iran has quite a large stockpile of about half a ton of 60% enriched uranium, several tons of 20%, and even more of 3.5%. That's a huge quantity of enriched uranium, and they are held in big canisters or containers, whatever we'll call them, and they were put in very stored places. Some of them in facilities that were attacked, some in facilities that were not attacked, and this is probably going to be able to be salvaged. And I think the main sticky point in this discussion is whether or not Iran, if they're after this wonderful attack and with all of the successes that I described, does Iran has the residual capability, the enrichment uranium that they need, centrifuges that they need, the ability to build enrichment facilities somewhere, and to fulfill the enrichment to 90% to highly enriched uranium. I think this is at the core of the discussion. The answer is technically probably yes, in the sense that not all of the stockpile has been destroyed. Definitely not all of the centrifuges has been destroyed. But this is only a technical answer. The more holistic answer is, what will they do, even if they decided to do this, with this enriched uranium? And this is where the attack on the weaponization program is so important. And I think one of the most striking things that Israel has done on the night between the 12th and 13th of June is to go after a large set of the top scientists of the Iranian nuclear weaponization program and their facilities, their laboratories, their equipment, and so forth, putting Iran in a situation that even if the supreme leader says, okay, I want to take what I have and dash to a bomb, they can't dash to a bomb because they don't have the people and the equipment to dash to a bomb, which I think makes this attack even more not only important, but also valuable and successful. Now, I gave a lot of premises here. And the truth is that we will know that everything that I said is correct only after time, when we have enough intel to know exactly what has happened. And once Iran uncovers some of the rubble and get into the facilities and see in their own eyes and with their own experience how big the damage is.
Okay, amazing. Eyal, you answered the next 10 questions that I had. So that's great.
That's a long one. I'm sorry, Chanan.
No,
I'll
no,
give
it's good. But
shorter
let's
answers.
let's unpack each of those different components for a second because there's
Yeah.
you covered a lot of ground there. So what I mean, you mentioned the assessment at this point was predominantly done through what means, through what mechanisms? Are these, aerial snapshots that people have access to? What it
So a lot of the BDA is done by imagery, satellite imagery.
satellite imagery?
Satellite work well in Iran. Most of it is desert, and most of the facilities are quite visible to satellite imagery. And there is just an eminent ability to compare what the facilities looked like before the attack and then after the attack, and very experienced people that know how to look at that imagery and analyze it properly to get the right details out of it. So most of this is done by imagery, but I'm sure that by this time we also have other sources of
Right.
intelligence by reporting of various sources.
Right. And you talked a little bit about it, like the signals intelligence, right, which is sort of the ability to wiretap and listen to conversations. But the Fordow nuclear plant was what, some 300 feet below ground, this massive mountainous terrain. Do you need IAEA inspectors? Do you need, covert boots on the ground to actually get into these sites to get a better assessment about what precisely was damaged? And frankly, how long do you think it'll take to get a full comprehensive view of the impacts? Are we talking about another year, 2 years? Is it possible the public never actually knows?
So the analysis of Fordow, first of all, is based on how the facility looks like from above air, and there are various ways to see this because there are shafts and there are entrances, and you can see how the blast wave escaped through the blast doors and the entrances and exits of the tunnels. So again, experienced people can understand whether or not there was a detonation inside the main hall. And the analysis that I've seen is that there is no question that there was a significant detonation in the main hall. Provided
Mhm.
that there was a significant detonation in the main hall, we know what this will do. Why? Because we have good analysis and simulations. I think at this time, all of the Intel organizations know exactly how Fordow was built. So I think we can answer that question. But for full verification, someone will need to get in. Now, if everything is covered with rubble, if all of the entrances and exits are covered with rubble, it's going to be very difficult to do this. It's going to take time to do this. But if no one can get in to see what's going on, it means that no one can operate the facility as well, right?
Mhm.
So as long as the Iranians or inspectors or any other can get inside and understand what actually happened, we won't know. But the facility is also inoperable during this period of time, and this is why I think that Fordow is. I mean, I think the American attack was successful and significant, and this site will be inoperable for a long period of time.
Yeah, I think there's estimated 2,700 centrifuges in Fordow according to reports. But do you think any of the highly enriched uranium is salvageable amid the rubble itself? Is that feasible?
So it's possible, but again, the Iranians will only know once they get inside. If those containers are still intact and transferable after this attack, then yeah, maybe it will be salvageable. But there's also enriched uranium, not 60%, maybe 20%. I'm not exactly sure on what was stored where, also in facilities in Isfahan. And the major
Right.
storage facility in Isfahan, I'm not sure there was attacked that way. I'm not sure that we plan to attack it that way for various reasons. Large parts of it are even more deeply dug into the mountain that is covering it. So the question of enriched uranium stays there. I'm pretty certain we need to take this into consideration. Iran will be able to salvage some enriched uranium to be able to enrich. This is where intelligence will kick in. We will need to follow it. Israel will definitely do this. We'll keep a very close open eye on everything the Iranians are doing, trying to understand what they found, what's their analysis, what were they able to salvage, where are they taking it, what are they going to do about it. We're going to look very deeply, and Iran should know that we have a capability to do this because the amount of very precise information we had on all of their elements, as was proven on June 12th and 13th and all the rest of the days, was very, very significant. So this will be the task going further. There's an American task, maybe to try to get a good deal with the Iranians that would remove that stockpile outside of Iran. They will hand it over if they agree to this full dismantlement and rollback that is demanded by the Americans. Then this could be a solution. But in any case, Israeli intelligence will keep a very, very close look on everything that is going in Iran.
You mentioned this earlier. What do you make of the concerns about the whereabouts of the quote unquote missing 400, I think, kilograms of HEU, of highly enriched uranium? Is this a fear? Is this overstated?
So that is what is everybody's talking about. It's not HEU. It's 60%
Oh, it's 60%, not
enriched.
right.
It's not weapon grade material yet, but
Right.
it's weeks from being weapons grade material. And everybody's talking about it because that's the closest they have to weapon grade uranium. But I have to say the 20% is just as bad. It won't take them maybe 2 weeks, maybe it will take them 6 weeks. But in our discussion, this is not very different or significant. But about the 60% as well, I have to say at this point, I don't know where it is exactly.
Right. All right. Well, let's take it a half a step back. I think one of the criticisms of JCPOA was that it really only held the Iranian nuclear program at bay for a defined period of time, right? That core provisions would expire after 10 years or after 15 years. How far back do you think that this joint military campaign pushed the Iranian nuclear program? I mean, if it's too soon to say, and I presume it is, right? Well, if that's a hard question to answer, like what are the particular indicators that you would look at to help you make that
Yeah,
determination?
yeah, that's a better way to put it, Hanan. So first about the JCPOA, yes, the JCPOA had various flaws. It was time limited, and the basic 10-year period would have expired right now. And then Iran in about 5 years were able to do whatever they can. Let's just imagine what that would mean. If Iran would have been compliant with the agreement that they had signed, and nothing else would have happened. And Iran would reach this point, and the UN Security Council would review Iran's behavior, and they will say, well, they did everything we asked them. So we can implement the sunset clauses or remove the snapback clause and give the Iran all of the concessions that the JCPOA was supposed to give them. It means that given this time, Iran would have been able to ramp up their enriched uranium capability, and in 5 years they would be able to do whatever they want and accumulate any amount of enriched uranium that they can. Can we imagine that scenario? That was the major flaw of JCPOA, and it started because the agreement allowed Iran and legitimized Iran's right to have enrichment capability above ground, below ground, wherever it was. This is the fundamental problem with JCPOA. The second problem, I spoke about the weaponization aspect of the program. The agreement didn't do almost anything with it, didn't deal with it. There's just one section called Section T that specifies the equipment that Iran is not able to possess. That's not really significant. No inspection, nothing of that sort. When we brought the archive in the beginning of 2018, that was, I think, the first time that everyone understood to what extent Iran has deceived the international community, the Americans, us, everyone else, about the weaponization program. And of course, it didn't deal with missiles and anything else,
This is the
regional
20.
activity, JCPOA.
Sorry, yeah, the
Yeah,
20. Could you just share for our audience what you meant by the 2018 um, effort by
yeah,
Israel?
for those who don't follow this closely, and it is almost it's going to be 8 years in January. It's been a long time.
January.
In the beginning of 2018, Israel conducted a Mossad operation that infiltrated a facility where Iran has stored what we call the nuclear archive, which is basically all of the documentation that Iran has accumulated over the years about the Ahmad program, which is the weaponization program that they had in full power and operation until 2003. In 2003, Iran packed the archive and set all of the scientists to various institutions all across Iran, told them, keep your knowledge the best you can, but do not work on the bomb. Right? So indeed, Supreme Leader in 2003 instructed his people, stop the rushing to the bomb, which was very strong until 2003. We were able to snatch that archive 15 years later in 2018, bring it home, share it with all of the key stakeholders so that everyone will be able to know how close Iran was to a bomb back in 2003. What would have happened if they hadn't stopped the bomb? And by the way, you know why they stopped the dash to the bomb in 2003? Because they woke up one morning and found the Americans to the east of them in Afghanistan,
In Iraq.
and then in
Right.
2003, a few days later, so to speak, to the west of them in Iraq, and the supreme leader was very certain that he's next. And this is why he stopped his
So in other
program.
words, there was a credible military threat, you're saying.
Oh yeah. Now the Americans did not intend to invade Iran. The Supreme Leader didn't know that, but and we also didn't know about the extent of the development of their program back in 2003. He didn't know that either. It just happened. Sometimes there is maybe divine intervention or serendipity. I don't know what's the proper term to call it, but that was then. In 2018, we brought that home and were able to share it with everyone, and we knew exactly what they were doing. This allowed us not only to understand what happened in the history, but also to understand what Iran was doing on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, to preserve that information. That is the basis also for the targeting for this precise, simultaneous direct attack that we did on June of the night of June 12th and 13th on those scientists, because we knew exactly who were the key scientists, what they were doing, what they were supposed to be in the future, who was keeping what information. This made it very, very effective. But I think we were diverted from your question, Hanan. You will need to remind me what
Yeah,
you're
so just to
asking.
go back, so I guess the question I was asking was, what are the indicators that would give you confidence that it pushed the Iranian nuclear program back,
Right.
X amount of years?
Right. So since I spoke about the weaponization, let's stick with that. Iran was. This is not a question of to what time we brought them back. This is a question of to what extent we have prolonged or delayed, or maybe even blocked Iran's ability to move and to build a weapon itself from the uranium. I don't have a good assessment. I've read assessments ranging from a delay of another 2 years, from the about 2 years that we thought, or 1 or 2 years that we thought that they would a need if they decided to dash with all of their capabilities. I think it will be more than that, but we'll need to keep a very close eye on that. That is the aspect of getting to weaponization. As for the facilities, it depends what we want to know. If we want to know how long it will take Iran to get back to the capabilities it had on June 11th, this is going to be years and years. But that's not the right question, right? The right question is how long or in what way did we delay Iran's ability to achieve the task of enriching uranium? It could be in a different facility, it could be by other means. And on this, I think it's too early to say. We will need to know to what extent there was damage, not only to the facilities, but to the centrifuges and to the stockpiles and all the questions that we said had before. And it will depend on if Iran will do this under inspection or not under inspection. So it's too early to know.
I mean, how critical is this is taking the expertise and the knowledge off the board, right? So the decapitation effort, right? The assassination of multiple high-level Iranian scientists. How critical of a factor is that in delaying their capacity to develop a stronger nuclear weapons program or a nuclear
I
program?
think this might be the most critical thing that was done, because Iran has never built a bomb before, right? Iran knows how to produce centrifuges, and Iran already knows how to enrich uranium. So there, the knowledge is not as important because it's distributed by so many people and possessed by so many experts. But this is not the case on weaponization. They have really done meticulous work to try to understand whatever they could from what they read and the little work that they have done themselves, and some help that they got from foreign experts that were willing to sell their knowledge for money. I'm talking about the 90s and the previous century, and maybe a little bit later than that. And on this area, knowledge is all they have because they've never done this and they don't know how to reproduce it. They will need to do this initially. Now, there have been given several comparisons to the Manhattan Project. I don't like this analysis because I think the Manhattan Project incorporated some of the most brilliant minds and physicists that ever walked the planet, Robert Oppenheimer and Teller and all of the rest. Just think what would have happened if the Americans wanted to do the Manhattan Project without all of these top experts.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think it would have been very difficult to do. Now, so this is why this is so important. But to be fair and also modest with the assessment, we will still need to keep an open eye to see have they taught new students. Maybe they have some talented younger experts that were able to pick up from where their assassinated professors were left. This job is not done just yet, but I think it's very important. If we hadn't done this, Iran would have been in a far worse situation in our perspective, right? But far better situation from their perspective, to actually be able to build a bomb.
I just want to remind everyone in the audience, if you have questions, please include them in the Q&A function at the bottom. I already see a bunch populating. I'll get to them in about 15 minutes. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Iran's counterattack, Eyal, right? They hit the Al Udeid Air Base, the U.S. Air Base in Qatar. It seems like it was choreographed with a ton of lead time. And there was almost it was almost performative to a certain extent. It felt like a kabuki theater, right? Where it's telegraphed in advance. And I don't know if President Trump was trolling the Iranians or not, but he like referenced that publicly, I think in a tweet or the like. Was that a signal that they wanted to kind of respond, but like in a de-escalatory way? And what do you think it revealed about the Iranian position post-attack?
Yeah. So yes, I think so. I think this is exactly what Iran was trying to do. Even maybe even weaker than the response they gave to the killing of Qasem Soleimani in January of 2019. Back then, they injured severely hundreds of American servicemen. This isn't the case at the moment. It seems like Iran really tried to do something that they will be able to say to their constituency, to themselves, to the supreme leader, or whatever, that they've done something that is they think is significant. But in reality, they've done very little. They threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz. They did not. They threatened to fire at American bases in Iraq and Syria. They did not. They threatened to fire on energy facilities in Saudi Arabia, in the Emirates. They did not. They didn't even retaliate against Israel in a stronger way than they did in previous nights. And of course, Israel suffered a significant toll. 29 people died from Iranian ballistic missiles shot. All of them shot and heavily
But was that a
populated civilian areas.
but yeah, was
Yeah.
that a feature of their desire to retain the decreasing number of ballistic missiles that they had? I mean, they were running out
No, I
ultimately.
don't. No, I think so. No, I think what they wanted is to respond against the Americans without prolonging the American involvement.
Hmm.
To all those who were saying the U.S. will intervene, this will become an Iraq and Afghanistan, the United States never intended to invade Iran. Even if Iran had responded stronger, I'm sure that the response or the counter response would have been aerial again. But I think Iran wanted to prevent that. I think they knew that if the United States will retaliate after their response, it will be after leadership targets, administrative targets, maybe economic targets. President Trump issued very strong messages and threats before that, even talking about the supreme leader itself, and that if he cannot make remember that if the supreme leader cannot make Iran great again, then why is he there? Maybe we need to remove him. I think Iran really was really worried about how the Americans will respond again, and they decided to step down from it, which is again a huge success to the Americans, to President Trump.
Yeah, I mean, after the Qasem Soleimani attack in what was it, early 2020, they did respond, and it didn't lead, fortunately, to any fatalities of U.S. Servicemen and women. It did lead to some significant injuries, but it was less than I think what people feared ultimately,
Yeah.
if not mistaken. And the same is here because at its core, uh, um, their primary interest is regime survival,
Yes. Yeah,
right?
and I think this is also the case with Israel, by the way, because also after what we've done to them, they did fire at us and with large numbers. And they did fire infrastructure, right? They fired at our refinery in Haifa, in Bazan.
Hmm.
But even that response was not as significant as I think we were prepared to absorb. The fact that Hezbollah and Hamas weren't there to participate in that attack kept Iran very vulnerable, not only in the defense but also on the offense. In the end, their response was way weaker and smaller than what we've all been afraid of, I will say, for years as we were planning this ahead.
Yeah, it almost makes them seem as if they're a paper tiger of sorts. There's a lot of language floating around over the last few weeks that Israel perhaps underestimated Hamas and perhaps overestimated um, Iran's capabilities, or collectively we overestimated Iran's capabilities. You know,
I'll be careful with that language. We definitely underestimated Hamas. And I think the major flaw of October 7 was hubris. We did not take them seriously enough, and we've seen the outcome. But you can never overestimate your enemy. I think if we had been so prepared in Lebanon and in Iran and able to execute it the way that we did, the damage would have been hard. I mean, we've seen what a single ballistic missile can do when it hits.
Yeah.
The only reason that only about, I think, 10 have fallen in populated areas is because we were able to intercept 90. The exact figure that I saw this morning is 86%. We were able to intercept 86% of their ballistic missiles. So this is not overestimation, because if we hadn't prepared properly and all of those ballistic missiles would have fallen in Tel Aviv and in Haifa and in Beersheba and in Jerusalem, not just the ones that did fall, then the damage would have been immense. So I would be careful with overestimation. We should never think that we're overestimating any of our enemies.
Right. There's a turn of phrase in Jewish thought, "Ein kedusha b'li hachana," right? There's no holiness without preparation, and you can make
Yeah,
a similar military argument for that as well. But where do you think Iran goes from here? I mean, are there concerns, realistic concerns, that they withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT? Do you think they limit IAEA inspectors? How bad would that be? I'm skeptical they'll close the Straits of Hormuz. But
yeah,
I can see a scenario in which there's like an uptick in terrorism, which I think scares folks. Where's your
yeah.
head?
So Strait of Hormuz, that's yesterday's news, right? If they wanted to do this after the American attack, they wouldn't have done so. I think they were scared away about this not only from the Americans but also from the Chinese. I can imagine how the Chinese told them, "You don't fuck with our." I'm sorry, did I just use that word that they shouldn't have?
It's
You should
okay.
not mess up. You should not mess up with the oil supply that we're getting from
Yeah.
you, from Saudi Arabia, from all the rest. So I think this is behind us. As for the NPT, I think this is a serious threat. Iran might do this. They will definitely prevent inspectors from getting anywhere close to the facilities until they know what the damage was, and this can happen. This can take a long period of time. So I am worried about them withdrawing from NPT. But as I said before, Israel intelligence will need to be very, very proactive on this, and we knew many things before the IAEA inspectors knew anyway. Because we had good intelligence in Iran, and so did the Americans. So that worries me, but I can understand how to mitigate this. But I think that we should all expect a large spike in terror activity all across. This is how they usually respond when they don't have any other way to do this. They have already demonstrated and proven that they have no problem in killing civilians. They can do this in Israel. They can do this abroad, and I'm pretty sure that we'll definitely need to prepare and defend against that.
The fact that a vast majority of their proxy network is more or less decimated, though Hamas certainly so. Hezbollah seems like a shadow of its former self. There isn't necessarily that land bridge across Syria at the moment, but they do have cells, I imagine, in different parts around the world. We saw what happened in '94 with the EMEA bombing in Argentina. This is something I presume people should be wary about or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so first, the fact that it wasn't there is critical. As I said, they did not have, they've built Hezbollah exactly for this purpose, to be there first as a deterrent and then as an offensive, a distraction to Israel, should there be an attack with Iran, as we've seen. But they will not, I don't think that they will abandon this strategy. They don't have any other. So I would assume that they will try to use every means they have to build a network. Maybe it won't be the same exact scheme. Maybe they'll devise innovative, horrific ideas that are different from what they used before. This is an element that is important for all of us to understand, because should there be a negotiation with the Iranians, this will need to be dealt one way or another. Preventing Iran from taking the vast amounts of money that will be supplied to them in an agreement, and preventing them from redeploying it on their proxy network, on their missile network, on their terror network. This will be an important piece, I hope, of any negotiated agreement that the Americans will.
Okay, so Eyal, imagine you're back in your old seat. Okay, you are the national security advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister. In this moment, right here we are, June 27th. What do you advise the Prime Minister strategically? How do you maximize this moment and kind of build on the success of the joint military campaign? Where would your head be?
So first, um, we need to understand that there are two separate things we need to do strategically to build upon these successes. One has to do, how do we keep our enemies down? And the second has to do with, how do we bolster the alliances of the pragmatic network of countries around us that now they're enemies. It's not just Israeli enemies. Iran was the enemy or adversary of Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and all the rest just as much as they were to countries that they've already succeeded in collapsing. And it was a fear in all those countries that they might end up like Syria or Iraq or Lebanon. So there are two things here. On the first issue, what I would advise, and I think that this is very clear, we will need to focus on intel and matching operational capabilities to make sure that Iran does not rise from where they're at and they cannot rebuild their program or find another way to get a nuclear weapon. This has to be top priority for the next years until we understand that there is a stable solution that we can trust and verify, which is not the case at the moment. We'll also need to focus our attention on how do we guard our borders so that things like October 7 or threats similar to that in Lebanon, or God forbid, things from Jordan coming into the West Bank, we need to put a lot of attention into that. These are the two things on the defensive side. And then on the opportunity side, we definitely have the ability now to transform the Middle East also in positive ways, not just in negative ways. First, it means that we need to stop the war in Gaza. This is my personal opinion. I've been saying this for many months. I think we've overextended that war for a long period of time, and we need to bring the hostages back, all of them dead and alive, as just as much, and to create new conditions for stability in Gaza without permanent military presence in Gaza from the Israeli side. This is something, we don't have the time to develop that at the moment, but I think this is crucial because without that, we cannot reopen the door for the engagement with the Saudis and with the rest of the countries that might agree to align. This is when you saw some tweets coming outside, it seemed like the work plan of President Trump as it comes to how to restore peace in the Middle East. All of those things were there. End the war in Gaza, return the hostages, reconstitute some kind of civilian governance in Gaza, and then move to normalization. I think that's doable. And I think this should be in Israeli top priority. I'm not sure that the political situation in Israel would allow that. Maybe not now, maybe it will take a little time, but this has to be our focus to the future.
I see dozens of questions already in, and I'm going to go to them momentarily. But do you think, Eyal, that President Trump and his team will try to maximize this military win, so to speak, to do what you had advocated for in terms of the war between Israel and Hamas?
I hope so. I hope that President Trump remains as focused and interested as he was until now. I don't know in what way this will play out. We'll need to wait and see. I'm sure there are close deliberations between them. I'm sure that they're talking about it even maybe not today. It's Shabbat already in Israel, but I'm sure this will be the major topic of discussion over the next week.
And do you think this makes Saudi normalization more or less likely? I'd asked this to our guests last week, and I'm curious. We were obviously collectively in a very different place. It was pre-US military strike,
Yeah.
but how does this impact that?
So let's talk about the parameters first because it's hard to know when what will happen. The Saudis were always
I hear you. You there? All right. I think we lost Eyal for a second, and hopefully he'll have an opportunity to join us momentarily. But in the interim, maybe yeah, we can reach out to Eyal and see if he's able to join. But if not, I think we might have to end this conversation earlier than anticipated. I do see a number of really interesting questions that I'm going to try to get to, assuming Eyal returns to the virtual. One, for example, from Dennis Mayer, and I think several others who asked something to the effect of what's to keep Pakistan or some other country like Russia, North Korea from providing the requisite knowledge or even bombs to Iran. Hopefully we'll be able to get Eyal to answer that question. And another from Frank Brodsky, to what degree was Iran's weak response based on Israel destroying so much of its weapon system versus political calculations by the Iranian regime? I'm going to see if we can get Eyal back on the line and answer some of those questions. So I appreciate everybody's patience while we try to figure that out. Um, Sorry, just bear with us.
I switched to my phone. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Okay, great. You're saying, yeah, go ahead. Eyal.
Sorry about that. My computer crashed.
No worries. I
So
stalled. I
we were
stalled.
talking about the Saudi.
Yeah, I was asking about whether it makes Saudi
Okay.
normalization more or less likely. And you were talking about that. Do you
Right.
want to finish that?
So
If not,
I think that first of all, yeah,
yeah, go
I'll
ahead.
finish that response. So I think that first, one of the major things that the Saudis always ask themselves is on what side do they want to be? Do they want to be on the side of when it comes to normalization? Do they want to join this Abrahamic vision and alliance of countries who believe that being in close ties with Israel is good for their interests? I think the Saudis just got a proof that Israel is a good partner. It's a good defense partner. It's a good operational partner. It's a good intelligence partner. And I think that this raises Israel's credit, so to speak, in this regard. The problem of how their immediate issue with the Palestinian conflict and the war in Gaza has not been resolved yet. But as I said before, I think this will not be moved until we end the war in Gaza, and I think that's doable. And the third element had to do with the Americans. Can they trust the Americans? Can they trust that the Americans will be there in the time of need? I think that President Trump has proven that he was willing to put his money where his mouth is and to use military force when needed to support the national security interest of the United States and also of the allies. He was also able to prove that he's doing it very cautiously so that things will not spill over to their partners, right? Saudi Arabia did not suffer as a consequence of the American response. By the way, Saudi Arabia did not suffer consequences also from the Israeli strike because I think Israel was also very cognizant of that threat, did not violate Saudi airspace, and so forth. So all in all, I think that the parameters are in a better shape than they were before. We will still need to find a solution to the Gazan to end the war in Gaza and to find a way to square the differences about the future of the Palestinian issue. But yeah, this can be discussed in a different setting, I'm sure.
Okay, great. While you were getting back on the line, I had highlighted one or two questions I intended to ask you. So let's start with some of the questions from some folks in the broader SAPIR community. Let's begin with Dennis Mayer, who asked something to the effect of, what's to keep Pakistan or some other country like Russia or North Korea from providing the requisite knowledge or even bombs to Iran? What's your response to Dennis?
Yeah. So first, yeah, that's a very good question, and we need to ask it also historically, right? What prevented them from doing it so far? Well, a few things have prevented them so far. I think most and foremost is their fear of being exposed in doing that and suffering the consequences of it. So the Pakistanis definitely since 2001 are heavily dependent on their alignment with the Americans. Is it still true at the moment after the conflict between India and Pakistan? That's a very good question. We need to keep an open eye. As it comes to Russia and even China, I think one of the surprising elements of how things played out over the last couple of weeks is how little support Iran actually got from Russia and China. They did not get anything more than lip service, no military aid, not even threats at Israel or the United States to stop targeting them. President Putin even gave a very bizarre comment. I don't know if you've seen it, that when he was asked why wouldn't he help Iran in defending against Israel, and he said, "There's so many Russian-speaking people in Israel. I have to defend them. I have to treat them." I found it very, very bizarre, but I think for him there is something there. I think that Iran cannot really trust their allies. Definitely not even remotely close to the way that Israel can trust its alliance with the United States. Will this keep that way in the future? I'm not certain in anything. We will need to keep our intelligence open very, very strongly. We on our side, the Americans on their side, to make sure that this doesn't happen.
Oh, yeah, it's astonishing the degree to which the Russians and the Chinese did virtually nothing in this
Yeah.
war. All right, so Eyal Frank Brodsky asks, to what degree was Iran's weak response based on Israel destroying so much of its weapons systems versus political calculations by the Iranian regime, i.e., perhaps fearing more attacks by the United States? Did you catch that? Eyal can hear?
So I think it's more about their inability to exercise more. I think if they were Yeah, I did. Can't you hear me?
Yeah, we're a little delayed, but keep going.
Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, so I think that the way they responded reflects their capabilities more than anything else. Not their calculus, not their political calculation. If they could do more damage, they would. If Hezbollah was intact, they would deploy them, I'm sure. Which makes it even more astonishing to what extent we were able to achieve our military objectives in the first night, not only attacking the facilities, but also decapitating their leaders of their military echelons and putting wedges exactly in the places that would prevent them from executing their attacks so well.
Okay. Eyal Anonymous asks, is this Israel's unipolar moment in the Middle East?
Uh, um, well, it shouldn't be, and I hope we don't fall to that trap, if I may. This does rhyme with the questions before about overestimating our enemies. Israel is a regional power, no doubt. What it does magnify is the fact that this is true for decades and decades, and against very serious adversaries over decades and decades. Being a country of about 10 million people and a GDP that is not even enough to get into the G20, and still we're able to do what we've done. I wouldn't call it a unipolar. I think that the Iranian problem is not over yet, definitely until as long as this revolutionary regime is there and sworn to eradicate us, they will find other ways and means to try to do this, and we will need to be very attentive to it. Also, the extreme Sunni threat isn't over. It's true that Hamas has been decimated, but Islamic Brotherhood is still there, and they're still supported by the Qataris and still supported by the Turks. And what are Erdogan's ambitions into the future is something that is early to say. I would be very worried about going into such a mindset. And having said all of that, I'm also very worried about the image of Israel in the international community, even in the United States. So we're not exactly enjoying all of the benefits of all of our successes, to say the least. So I would try to as much as I can on myself, and also to the people that I advised in the past, and hopefully we'll be able to engage with in the future. We need to keep ourselves very, very modest about our military successes. There is a long, long way to go before Israel restores all of its very profound virtues.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like what you're sort of articulating is like kind of the importance of Israel to avoid like the post 1967 hubris, right? I think you used the word
Yeah,
hubris earlier, right?
yeah,
And I mean, there's how do you view like October Israel? And I was talking to a colleague about this. I'm thinking October 1973, right? I'm thinking October 2023 versus a June Israel, a June 1967, a June 2025. These are two very different
yeah,
types of Israels. I wish I could take credit for that conception. But what's your thoughts on sort of those are sort of a bifurcated conception of what Israel is, both at its highest and at its lowest points?
yeah. That's a very good line, Chanan. I will use it with your permission.
Oh,
Uh,
it's not
the,
mine. Sure.
okay, so you need to tell me so I can להביא דברים בשם אומרם.
Consider. I
But in
will.
any case, I think it's a good symbolism. Look, I think the major takeaway from it is how will this viewed in historical perspective and in hindsight. Um, uh, because as you alluded before that, 1973 stemmed out of this sense of enormous uh, sense of self capacity and omnipotentism that we got from the Six Day War in 1967. I hope that we don't fall into this trap, as I said before. But I do hope that we're able to harness all of this and absorb all of the good outcomes that came out of this strategically and make the right decisions moving into the future. Israel has a serious internal problem that we need to heal. I think there is also serious issues for the Jewish people and diaspora that we need to attend to. There are many things that we need to put our mind. I wouldn't want us to think that we're now solved all of our acute problems and now we can do whatever we want, as I think might have been in some aspects of our community or our society after the Six-Day War in 1967.
Mhm. Okay, I think we're gonna take a few more questions. So if you do have, continue to place them in. I'll continue now with Ruven Hach. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. If not, mea culpa. All right, so Ruven asked the following. Is Israel prepared to strike again if Iranians start to rebuild their missile capability? And will the U.S. support the Israeli response or try to prevent Israel from responding?
So first, is Israel capable? Yes, Israel did not stop the attack because we ran out of ammunitions or interceptors. We stopped the attack because there were conditions for ceasefire brokered by President Trump. And we were able to do this again. Iran will not restore its air defenses anytime soon. The question of the U.S. is an important one, of course, because we didn't talk about this. Yeah, it seems like a very long time ago, but we need to go back and understand that President Trump must have approved the Israeli attack in June 12th. Israel would not have done it without an approval by President Trump. So the question of alignment with the Americans is, of course, important. I think it will depend on what it is that we're seeing. Not every action by Iran will deserve opening this, but I will keep a very close eye on what they do with the enriched stockpile, what they do with their weaponization program. These are the things that I'll be watching, and I think if we'll see significant intentions or even starting of doing things on the ground on any of those fronts, this will be a justified reason to go about it again.
I was talking with uh, my brother the other day, and to what extent, Eyal, do you think post 10/7, everything that has transpired over the last, I don't know, year and a half, do you think that was part of some broad national security strategy undertaken by Israeli leadership, or is just the accumulation of a series of events that Israel's government military continued to build off of throughout the time? Meaning, do you think at any point post 10/7, the Israeli military and intel establishment, the national security establishment got together and said, okay, we got to completely degrade Hamas, then we're going to go after Hezbollah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, leading up to and culminating with destroying a lot of Iran's nuclear capabilities? Or is this just happenstance and just a sequencing that took place over time, and Israel's national security establishment just took advantage of different moments?
So, I mean, first, Israel's capabilities to do all that uh, did not build up just over the last year and a half. Israel capabilities with Lebanon, definitely Israel's capabilities in Iran or there before. So in a sense, Israel's understanding that we will need to take care of those threats in the future is not new and was very, very sound. But at the same point, I'll say we're not very good at strategic thinking. I was national security advisor. There is no national security strategy in Israel. We started writing it uh, and building the process that will lead to it. This is not one of our strengths, but we are good at building capabilities and then deploying them when the right opportunities come, which I think is basically what happened. The chain of events allowed to do more and more, um, and uh, and and then just to add on something that we said before, we're also much better in using opportunities militarily than unique opportunities politically and regionally. So now, when we start overcoming this and rebuilding strategically, I think we'll have more challenges. But I hope that we have learned many of the lessons that were needed to be learned. Yes.
Okay, great. We're going to do one or two more questions and then call it a day. You've been very generous with your time. So Joseph Weber, again, sorry if I'm butchering your name, or Weber, asks, when you say end the Gaza war, what does that look like, and when might that happen? All right, that's an easy one. So what are your thoughts
Hmm.
on that question?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you my personal take, right? And I know that this is very controversial. It's controversial in Israel. It's controversial here. Um, um, but I feel more at ease to say this after we've seen what Israel is capable of doing, both in Lebanon and in Iran. Um, there are military challenges that could be dealt with the Israeli strong might capabilities and resolve, and there are things that are not. I don't think that the war in Gaza should end when there is ongoing Israeli IDF presence in Gaza. I don't think this will serve the interests of Israel or serve the interests of creating any a new environment in Gaza. So my basic thinking is that we've done so much damage to Hamas so far. We've degraded Hamas more than we've degraded Hezbollah, way more than we've degraded the Iranians, but we're very happy with the amount of degradation that we did to Hezbollah and Iran, right? It's all a matter of perception and of calibration of expectations in this regard. I think it's way more important to ensure that we prevent Hamas or any other radical organization in Gaza to accumulate arms again, to be able to produce a threat against us. And this could be done. Gaza is relatively small. The fact that we failed before has more to do with us not taking them seriously than with us being able to do this. And I think that we should recarve our strategy, take them seriously, do the right things about it. We don't need military presence on the ground to see, God forbid, more incidents like we've seen 2 days ago when 7 soldiers lost their lives because a single terrorist were able to come closer to their armored vehicle. And of course we will see more in that, because unfortunately there are dozens of thousands of very radicalized, very violent, well equipped, not with rockets but with rifles and explosives in Gaza that could come after us. We don't need this conflict. We can accomplish so many important and strategic things that to bog down in this mud in Gaza.
Hey, final question, and I'll just use the prerogative of my time here to ask you. You've described professionally, from a professional point of view, your assessment on the current situation. You've been working on this for the better part of your entire career, a quarter century. You're working in government on these issues. You served in part as like an architect of Israel's response or conception of how to contend with Iran's nuclear ambitions and the like. When you saw June 2025 take place, what was your own reaction? How did you think about it? How did you feel about it?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you can all see my smile. I think first and foremost, I was very proud. I was very proud to see how my friends, my colleagues, and the work that was done for such a long period of time has all come together in the right moment, in the right way, to achieve the right outcome as we've envisioned, maybe even better than we've envisioned, all of us. And I may be proud, especially because 630 days ago, on October 7th of 2023, I was devastated. And I felt the disgrace and humiliation that we were able or not able to defend our civilians this way. And I say this in first tense because I still feel in service. I will always be in service of the Israeli public and Israel's national security. I think this is the starking contradiction between those two. On a personal note, I'm very happy that this happened this way. I'm very proud of everything that was done. I'm actually going back to Israel. We're wrapping up in the United States. We've been here for 2 years. We're moving back with my kids, the whole family. We're going back, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the next chapter. I'm looking forward to continuing the building of this magnificent country with such magnificent virtues. And we need to restore it as a sense of pride. I would want Israel to be a sense of pride to all of you. I'm sure it is, because otherwise you wouldn't be here and you wouldn't be involved with SAPIR. But you know very well, with your peers, your colleagues, your friends, it is not as strong as it used to be. It is not strong as it needs to be. And I think that in Israel, there's a lot to be done to make you all not only proud of who Israel is, but also proud in who you are, what you serve, what your narrative is, what your story is, so we can all write the next chapter in this book.
Amen. Eyal, on behalf of the hundreds of people who have joined here to listen to you today, our deep appreciation for your expertise and for your insights. And I hope you continue even once you return to Israel to be part of the broader SAPIR community and network. I want to thank the hundreds of you who joined us today for listening and asking your tough questions of Eyal. And I want to encourage you to join us on June 30th at 12 o'clock. We're going to have another conversation, a SAPIR discussion with SAPIR editor-in-chief Brett Stevens and with Amit Segal, chief political analyst for Israel's Channel 12 News, on the question of, can the media keep kosher? We hope you'll join us then and for many other SAPIR virtual conversations. With that, again, Deep Hakarat Hatov. Shabbat Shalom to everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. And thank you again, Eyal. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.